So now we're going to be looking at anatomical structures, and this is going to be 7.9 anatomical structures. So when you're looking at anatomical structures, you're looking at the anatomy of the organism, the shape of it, the bones of it, how is it actually structured physically in order to allow it to survive its environment. So when you're looking, first of all, at homology, a homologous structure is a structure that is going to be similar in, we can say, format or structure and shape, but can serve different functions. For example, an organism, this might be helpful when an organism inhabits different environments. So if you're looking at the top picture right here, you have bones of whales, cats, horses, and humans. And so you'll see in this that you have a similar arrangement of the bones. But these are all homologous structures because they all allow the organism to do something else. Swimming, flying, running, that sort of thing. With analogous structures, you're going to have a similar function, like being able to fly, but different structure. What are you made of? What are you composed of? An example here will be, again, this is similar structure in the wings, but these are going to be called analogous structures because they're made of different things. Insects' wings are made of chitin, the bird, bones and feathers. The bat wings, also another type of bone, but a membrane instead of the wings or the chitinous material. With homologous structures, when you're thinking about the structure being similar, a lot of times the similarity in structure means that the code or DNA is similar. And this is usually evidence for common ancestor. And it could be due to that radiated technique that we've talked about before, similar to the birds. However, when you're looking at the analogous structures actually show no recent common ancestor. And yes, to a common environment. Or selection forces. So they all have different ways to fly, and that allows them to be successful, but they didn't come from a common ancestor. The analogous structures came from the same build, but the information, the DNA for that, came from a different way, from a different means. So what leads to an analogous structure? This is going to be the result of convergent evolution. And a lot of times you'll see this MRCA, and this just stands for most recent common ancestor. When you're looking at these anatomical structures, a lot of times they can show us some patterns of evolution, and there's 3 patterns of evolution that we want to mention that sometimes this could be an example of or evidence of. So on this graph, the first thing you should see is the time. There you should also see that you have a parent species. With the parent species, you have this divergence, and so divergent evolution. This is your most recent common ancestor right here, and you diverged for some reason. An example of this could be the cat and the horse from our homologous structures from above. However, in this next one, you have an idea of convergent evolution. And this can be like the wings. From different parent species, but they have this similarity due to those analogous structures. And then you also have what's known as a parallel evolution. This could be your zebra and your antelope, and whether or not they get eaten by the cheetah. Here you see actually a similar pressure, the cheetah, but the responses to that selection force and who is selected has no relationship. So another example of parallel evolution are these marsupials and these other mammals as well. These are from America, or I'm sorry, Australia, and these are from America. And while they have some similar selective pressures, the fact that they're changing isn't really connected. There's not a true relationship between the two. And the last thing that we just want to look at very briefly is some vestigial structures. And the vestigial structures once had a function, but it is no longer necessary. You had no disadvantage to having the structure, but no advantage either. So therefore, no pressure to keep or lose it. Examples of these, there's some very common examples in humans, and you could probably think of that. But for example, like your wisdom teeth, appendix, although there's some question about the appendix, and also your tailbone. All things that we once used but no longer use. So something that we retained from our most recent common ancestor. Another example is the whale's pelvic bone. Okay. There's actually some history or some connection, a relationship with whales to cows, and a little theory there as to how they have a pelvic bone that they obviously, if you notice in the skeleton, they don't use. And the last thing is the idea of imperfect structures. Imperfect structure is the idea that natural selection has no end goal. So there is no perfect feature, such as our eyes. Our eyes are not perfect. Examples would be our vertebrate eye. In a vertebrate eye, you actually have a nerve in front of the receptor. Where the light actually must move through it. And this actually leads to a blind spot. In our vertebrates. However, if you have something like a mollusk eye, you actually have the receptor first, then the nerve behind it. And usually, this means that they have one giant eye. Other things that you can use as examples is the photosynthetic protists. Some of them contain an eye spot, and they've actually kept these for years, hundreds of thousands of years, and have not evolved past that eye spot. It's just enough for them to be able to see or visualize that there's light in their vicinity, rather than actually being able to identify exactly what it is. Make sure you go back and answer the rest of the questions and continue with your note cards for tonight, and we'll talk about these more later on.